I thought he loved my confidence, until I realized he only loved controlling it. The moment I stopped apologizing for being self-sufficient, he started telling people I was cold, selfish, not woman enough. But he forgot one thing. Everyone he lied to, they knew me too. You ever convince yourself that silence is the same thing as stability? That as long as no one's yelling, crying, or walking out the door, things must be okay? That was us. We didn't fight much. We didn't scream. We didn't throw things or post dramatic quotes online. In fact, from the outside, we probably looked healthy, maybe even boring. But for a while, I thought boring meant peaceful, predictable, safe. We met through mutual friends during a weekend getaway. One of those lake house situations where no one knows where the extra towels are, and you bond over burnt pancakes and bad Bluetooth speakers. He was magnetic in that setting. Charming, loud in a way that made everyone else lean in. I liked how he made people laugh. I liked that he chose me. And when we got back to real life, he kept choosing me. Texts in the morning, long calls at night, inside jokes stacking up like bricks. I fell into it fast, faster than I usually do. And he told me that scared him a little. Said he needed someone who didn't move at 1,000 miles an hour emotionally. So I pulled back. I gave space. I let him lead. For a while, it worked. Or at least, I convinced myself it did. He had this way of making small things feel huge, but not in the romantic sense. If I offered to pay for something, he'd go weirdly quiet. If I mentioned a work achievement, he'd nod and then change the subject. If I got ready faster than him, he'd joke that I was rushing him on purpose. All these little moments that didn't feel like red flags, more like yellow ones. Almost nothing on its own. But together, they built something I didn't have a name for yet. And I ignored it because he never raised his voice, never cursed at me, never laid a hand on me or slammed a door or did any of the things the internet told me to watch out for. He just made me smaller, a little bit at a time, and called it balance. He'd say things like, "You're just really intense about things," or, "You always need to be in control." And I'd nod. I'd apologize. I'd try to soften myself. I thought that was love, compromise, growth. But what it really was erosion. It was only later I realized. He didn't fall for my independence. He fell for the idea that he could slowly dismantle it and still have me thank him for caring. And the moment that illusion cracked, the moment I stopped playing along, he didn't just lash out at me. He started rewriting the story for everyone else. Little did I know, everything was about to change. It started with a dinner. Not a fight, not a blow-up, just a quiet, overly polished dinner at his place, with a bottle of wine I brought and a weird amount of candlelight. He said he wanted to celebrate me. Something about how I'd landed another promotion and was really doing big things. On paper, that should have felt amazing. But his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I remember how he poured the wine. Too slowly, too focused, like his brain was rehearsing something. We toasted. I thanked him. I said something about how I couldn't have done it without his support, because that's the kind of thing you say when you're trying to keep everything smooth. And he nodded, said, "You're really something else." Then, "You ever think maybe you don't need me at all?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that wants to hurt. "You're always talking about how you handle things on your own. How you've got your career, your apartment, your investments, your friends. You always say you're self-contained. So what am I here for, really?" It hit me like a flicked knife, shallow, but sharp. I froze for a second. Tried to make it a joke. "You're here because I want you here. That's kind of the point, isn't it?" But he shook his head. "Nah, you like control. You like having someone to fit around your schedule, your goals, your world. You don't really need anyone." Something twisted in my stomach. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the tone. Like I had committed a betrayal by not depending on him. Like choosing to stand on my own somehow made me a bad partner. I asked, quietly, "Do you feel like I'm shutting you out?" He leaned back. "I feel like you'd replace me in a week and not even miss a beat." That silence that followed. It felt like drowning in soft music. I stared at my plate, untouched. He poured himself more wine, as if that was the end of the conversation. But I couldn't let it go. "Is that really how you see me?" He didn't look up. "It's how everyone sees you. You're impressive, sure, but you're not warm. You don't need people. That's hard to love." That was the first time I felt it, a shift. Like I was being slowly recast in his story. Not the independent woman he admired, but the cold one he tolerated. A warning, maybe, or the beginning of an excuse. I didn't argue. I just sat there, trying not to cry into a perfectly cooked steak. Because what do you even say to someone who's telling you your strength makes you unlovable? That should have been my first red flag. But that was just the beginning of my nightmare. At first, I tried to forget it. The dinner, the comments, the cold way he twisted something I'd always been proud of into a flaw. I told myself he was just feeling insecure, maybe intimidated. I even Googled things like how to support a partner who feels emasculated, as if I'd somehow created this rift by existing too loudly. But things started shifting after that night. Subtly, intentionally, he began dropping little comments in front of our friends, just barely veiled. You know her, always got her calendar locked down to the minute, he'd say with a laugh. Or, she doesn't really do messy emotions. Everyone would chuckle, including me. But each time, it landed like a quiet slap. I started noticing who wasn't reaching out anymore. People I used to grab drinks with after work. Couples we'd hang out with on weekends. One friend canceled our coffee last minute, twice. Another ghosted altogether. I didn't think much of it, until a third one replied to my check-in with a dry, "Didn't think you needed anyone these days." That one stopped me cold. I reread it 5 times. Then I asked straight up, "What do you mean by that?" He left me on read. That was the first time I let myself wonder, is someone saying something behind my back? I didn't want to believe it. But then, during a birthday party for one of his co-workers, people I barely knew, someone asked me, "So is it true you make him sleep on the couch when you're upset?" I laughed awkwardly. "What? No." The guy shrugged. "Oh, I must have misunderstood something he said at happy hour." Misunderstood something? Sure. On the way home, I asked him about it. "Why would anyone think I make you sleep on the couch?" He smirked. "I don't know. People exaggerate." "Did you say something like that?" He didn't even pretend to care. Maybe I joked around. You get so serious sometimes, it's hard to talk to you without you picking it apart. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't insecurity anymore. This was shaping a narrative. He wasn't just embarrassed by my independence. He was slowly turning it into a weapon. A way to isolate me. To pre-spin the story for when things eventually fell apart. So that when I walked away, and I was starting to feel like I might, he could say, "See? I told you she doesn't care about anyone but herself." It wasn't just about me and him anymore. It was about the version of me he was building for everyone else. And I had no idea just how far he'd already gone. I didn't go looking for proof. I wasn't one of those people who scrolled through messages or planted traps. I still wanted to believe I was imagining it, that I was being overly sensitive, overly analytical. That maybe I'd become one of those partners, the kind who sees betrayal in every shadow. But then, his laptop auto-connected to our shared Bluetooth speaker. It was a Sunday morning. I was cleaning, music playing, when suddenly, mid-song, the speaker cut out and was replaced by the unmistakable sound of his voice. Talking, then laughter, then her voice. I froze. The audio was muffled, but clear enough to make out tone, intimacy, familiarity, and a joke that didn't land quite right. Her. She doesn't even like people, does she? Him. Only when they're useful. Then laughter. Their laughter. I don't know how long I stood there before I figured out it was a video call. He was out, running errands, and clearly forgot his laptop was still synced to the speaker we used for everything. Music, movies, shared calls. I should have turned it off. I didn't. I listened. And what I heard was a carefully curated demolition of my character. Not just frustration or venting. Not just, we had a fight, and I'm upset. No, this was deliberate. Performed. Practiced. He talked about how hard I was to love. How everything had to be her way. How I never let anyone in, and refused to be vulnerable. He said he felt like just a placeholder in my life. That I only ever smiled when I was around people who mattered more. Then she said it, the part that finally made me shake. She sounds exhausting. He didn't defend me, didn't correct her, just laughed, and said, "You have no idea." I stood there, trembling, one hand gripping the back of the couch. I don't remember turning off the speaker. I don't remember how long I stood there afterward. I just remember the quiet, how loud it suddenly felt. This wasn't about me being too independent. This was character assassination. To someone else. Behind my back. While still kissing me good morning, texting me good night, sharing meals and beds and plans. And it wasn't just the betrayal. It was the casual ease of it. The rehearsal of it. Like this wasn't new. Later that night, he came home like nothing happened. Dropped the grocery bags on the counter, kissed my cheek. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked, "Did you have a good call?" He looked up, slightly startled. "What? While you were running errands? Someone called you?" He hesitated. "Yeah, just a friend. A friend who thinks I'm exhausting?" That was the first time he flinched. But I didn't confront him. Not fully. Not yet. Because now I needed something else. I needed to know how deep the rot really went. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was crying. That part came later. What kept me up was the timeline. The realization that this call wasn't the beginning of anything. It was the middle. Maybe even the end. How many people had already heard his version of me? How many smiled at me, knowing they'd been fed a script where I was cold, calculating, transactional? The next day, I opened Instagram, something I usually avoided when I was upset, and started scrolling through his tagged photos. At first, nothing unusual. A picture from our trip to Santa Barbara, a friend's engagement party, his coworker's barbecue. I looked at every caption, every comment, trying to feel out the edges of what I was missing. And then I saw it. A post from a mutual acquaintance, someone in his circle, not mine. A group shot from 2 weeks ago. I wasn't in it. He had told me it was just drinks with the guys. But right there, in the corner of the photo, was her. The same woman whose voice I'd heard through the speaker. She was leaning in toward him, hand on his arm. Casual. Familiar. Too comfortable to be new. The caption read, "Sunday vibes with the real ones." I scrolled through the comments. One of them, from his friend, said, "Love this couple." No sarcasm. No irony. Just out in the open. He had a shadow relationship. A social circle where I didn't exist. A version of his life where I was already written out. Or worse, recast as the villain. My hands went cold. I clicked deeper into her profile. It was private, but the bio said enough. A quote about healing through honesty and a location pin that matched the place he'd claimed to be taking solo walks on weekends. Healing through honesty. How convenient. I didn't message her. I didn't like anything. I just stared, and then checked who we had in common. There were names I recognized. Names I thought were friends. Names I thought were mine. It wasn't just emotional betrayal. It was social displacement. A quiet campaign. Like he'd been handing out poison in tiny doses, long before I ever tasted it. Later that evening, I asked him, again calmly, "How long have you known her?" He didn't even pretend to ask who I meant. He just sighed. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I know what you've been saying about me." He didn't deny it. He just said, "You're really going to make me the bad guy now?" I stared at him for a long time. "You already did that yourself." But I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't storm out. Because this wasn't the climax. Not yet. This went so much deeper than I thought. I didn't leave. Not yet. That's the part that still stings when I think about it. Not the betrayal, not the lies, not the gaslighting, but the silence that followed. I went to work. I answered messages. I smiled when I needed to. And every night, I shared a space with someone who had already replaced me emotionally and socially, but hadn't had the nerve or the decency to make it official. Because he still wanted the optics. I was still useful. Still the power couple girlfriend when he needed me to play that part in public. Still the trophy who made him look like a man strong enough to handle a woman like me. Still the apartment he didn't pay full rent on. Still the emotional support he mocked in private, but leaned on when the job got hard or when his mother made him feel small. Part of me wanted to scream it all out, burn the whole thing to the ground, to expose him to his friends, to her, to the people he'd turned against me with quiet smirks and half-truths. But another part of me, the part that still clung to the idea of being reasonable, graceful, above it, whispered, "What if that just makes you look worse?" So I waited. And while I waited, I started documenting. Every message, every interaction, every subtle jab and microaggression. I opened a private Google Doc and began writing down dates, quotes, witness names. Not for court, not for drama, for me. Because I needed to reclaim the narrative. Not for them, but because I was starting to forget who I actually was. His version of me was so loud, so well-practiced, that even in my own head, I was starting to wonder if maybe he was right. Maybe I was cold. Maybe I was too self-sufficient. Maybe I had pushed people away. But then I'd reread my own entries. The screenshots. The silent nights. The dismissive looks. The backhanded compliments. The third glass of wine he always poured when I said something he didn't like. And I'd remember, no, that's not cold. That's survival. It took me weeks to plan my exit. Not because I was afraid of him, but because I didn't want him to twist it, to make it look like I cracked. Like I finally became the too much he always warned people about. So I made it slow, subtle. I started reaching out to the friends who'd gone quiet. Not to accuse, just to reconnect. I posted photos of myself with family, with coworkers, laughing, alive. I made him nervous, without ever raising my voice. And I moved my valuables out one by one. The things that mattered. The keepsakes. The things he might claim were shared. I wrapped them in scarves and slipped them into my work bag. Every day, one less thing he could weaponize. It wasn't revenge I was planning. It was an exit with dignity. Because the truth was, I didn't want him to hurt. I wanted him to realize I'd already gone. I spent sleepless nights planning. Finally, I knew what I had to do. The night I told him I was moving out, he didn't yell. He laughed, like I'd just said something cute, naive, temporary. He leaned against the kitchen counter, sipping a beer, and said, "Okay, but you'll be back. You always run when things get too real." That's when I realized he never saw me as a person, just a pattern, something to interpret, manipulate, predict. "I'm not running," I said. "I'm done." He rolled his eyes, walked past me, and said over his shoulder, "You'll text me in a week." But I didn't. I packed the rest of my things, left the spare keys on the counter, and walked out without asking for closure, without demanding acknowledgement, without one final, tearful confrontation, the kind he was probably hoping for, the kind that would make him feel wanted, even if it was in anger. I left him in silence. For the first few days, it was almost too easy. I expected drama, pushback, rage, but instead, radio silence. Part of me felt relieved. Maybe he was finally done too. Maybe I'd gotten out clean, until I started hearing the echoes. A friend messaged me, "Are you okay? He said you left because you couldn't handle commitment." Another one, "He told everyone you ghosted him in the middle of your lease." And then, the final insult, I saw a comment under one of his posts. "You deserve someone who actually shows up." He liked it. That was the moment I realized. He was rebuilding the story again, in real time. I wasn't the woman who calmly removed herself from a toxic dynamic. I was the unstable, cold girlfriend who ran the moment things got serious. And it worked. People bought it. Because he was good at this, the victim play, the half-truths, the emotional spin that made everything seem like he had been the one holding it all together while I what? Had a meltdown? Walked out for no reason? But I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't going to fight for space in a narrative he'd already poisoned. I wasn't going to clear my name in group chats or post a breakup essay online. Instead, I posted one photo. A picture of me, laughing, drink in hand, surrounded by the same people he once claimed didn't really get me. No caption, no explanation, just presence. And that's when he broke his silence. He texted, "You really don't waste time, huh?" I stared at the message. Typed, deleted, typed again, then finally just sent. "You said I was too independent. You forgot that means I actually leave." He didn't reply. For a moment, I thought that was it. That maybe I'd finally reached the end. But I was wrong. I thought it was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. It started with a message request. Not from him, from someone I barely knew. A woman named Tasha, who used to show up at game nights we hosted once in a blue moon. We'd never really talked outside of group events. So when her name popped up in my DMs, my guard went up fast. "Hey, sorry if this is weird. I know we're not close, but can I ask you something? Did you really leave because you cheated?" My heart stopped. No hi, no context. Just that, dropped like a brick through the window. "Because that's what he's been telling people," she added a minute later. And I don't know. Something felt off. I sat staring at the screen, throat dry. Cheated? Of all the narratives he could have spun, that one felt like a direct attack on the last thing I still had, my integrity. It wasn't just about us anymore. This was about burning the bridge behind me, so I couldn't cross back if I ever wanted to. It was about making sure if I ever told my version, no one would believe me. Because who listens to the cheater, right? I replied, carefully, "That's not true. I left because of emotional manipulation, and because he was getting close to someone else behind my back. I have no reason to lie." Tasha wrote back, "That's kind of what I thought. I don't even know why I'm telling you this, but he's been out with that girl a lot. The one from the speakerphone. So he wasn't even hiding it now. Not from his new circle. Not from our old one. And worst of all, not from mine. Because within 2 days, I got 2 more messages. One from a coworker, one from an old college friend. Same pattern. "Hey, Just wanted to check in. Are you okay? I heard some stuff, and it didn't sound like you. Do you want me to say anything? Or just leave it alone? He wasn't just smearing me. He was testing how far he could go before someone pushed back. But he made one mistake. He underestimated the people who actually knew me. Not the ones who saw me through the lens he curated, but the ones who'd been in my life for years. The ones who knew my patterns, my values, my silence when I'm hurting, and my restraint when I could easily destroy someone. And it turns out, those people weren't just listening. They were watching. One of them, my closest friend since college, sent me a screenshot of a group chat I hadn't even known I'd been removed from. And in it, a full rant from him, paragraphs long, all about how I weaponized independence, how I emotionally abandoned him, how I refused to make room for someone else's needs. It was articulate, manipulative, almost convincing, until my friend, bless her, replied with, "You mean the woman who paid half your rent, helped you through 2 layoffs, and never once made you feel small for it?" No one replied after that. What happened next made me question everything. I should have felt vindicated. The group chat pushback, the quiet DMs of support, the cracks in his campaign, all signs that truth was crawling its way through the wreckage. But I didn't feel powerful, or angry, or righteous. I felt tired, bone-deep tired. The kind that doesn't go away with sleep, because it's not just about rest. It's about everything you carried while pretending it wasn't heavy. That week, I stopped posting, stopped replying to people who just wanted to know my side. I didn't want to perform my pain. I didn't want to reclaim the narrative. I just wanted to stop bleeding from every version of myself he'd tried to rewrite. And then the call came. From my mother. I hadn't even told her we broke up. We weren't the talk everyday type. She'd liked him enough, but we never really went deep into relationship details. So when she called, voice gentle, like she was trying to walk through a field of glass, I knew something was off. "Honey, someone from our church group asked if everything was okay. She said she heard you'd had a breakdown." I closed my eyes. Of course. He'd gone nuclear. Reached into corners of my life I thought were protected by distance. But narcissists don't need proximity, just access. And he'd had years of access. I didn't know what to say, she continued, because I didn't know anything was wrong. That was the breaking point. Not the lie, not the invasion, but the sound in my mother's voice, that pause between "I didn't know" and "anything was wrong." He'd managed to do the one thing I didn't see coming. Make me doubt whether I was even worth defending anymore. I hung up, sat on the edge of my bed, and let the exhaustion hit. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was done. Done explaining. Done trying to win the breakup. Done collecting proof. Done rehashing the way he dismantled me in slow, pretty sentences and smiling sabotage. That night, I opened the Google Doc where I'd been tracking everything. All the screenshots, transcripts, quotes, call logs. I reread every line. Every moment I stayed silent when I should have screamed. Every time I protected his dignity while he carved away at mine. And then I deleted it. Not out of weakness, but because I realized something terrifying and beautiful at once. I didn't need proof anymore. I didn't need to justify why I left. I didn't need a mic drop or a redemption arc. I just needed to live in a reality where his voice wasn't louder than my own. But even in that clarity, I knew one thing wasn't over yet. I realized what I had to do to end this once and for all. The final confrontation didn't come with fireworks. No slammed doors, no screaming matches, no dramatic re-entrance into his life. It came in the form of a simple email. Subject line, clarification. It was addressed to the members of the group chat I'd been removed from. A few mutual friends. One of his co-workers. The girl he'd been parading around like she was the upgrade. I didn't CC him. I didn't even use his name. All I did was attach 3 things. A voice memo. The one from the Bluetooth speaker. Cleaned up. Labeled with the date and time. A screenshot of the placeholder comment under his tagged photo with her. A short message that read, "Since my name is still being passed around, I figured it's fair to share a few things. You can make your own decisions after that. I'm not asking anyone to pick sides. Just to stop believing things that aren't true." I hit send and closed the tab. No follow-up. No escalation. No, just so you know. It was the cleanest break I'd ever made, and the one that shook him the most. Because 2 days later, I got a text. Really classy. Trying to ruin my life now. I didn't respond. He called. I declined. He messaged again. "You just proved everything I said about you." I stared at that one a little longer. Then, for the first time in months, I let myself feel what I'd been pushing down since the dinner with the candles. The laugh he gave when I said I was leaving. The way he smirked like he knew I'd crawl back eventually. The condescension. The manipulation. The erosion. And I felt nothing. No rage. No desire to correct him. Not even pity. Just relief. Because I knew, finally, that he'd lost the one thing he thought he'd always control. The script. He couldn't write my part anymore. Word started getting around. Not from me, but from the people who'd seen both sides now. I heard through a mutual friend that the new girl stopped showing up to events. That someone called him out at a party after hearing the voice memo. That he wasn't doing well. And still, I said nothing. Because this wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about freedom. About reclaiming the quiet. About knowing that when someone tells you you're too independent, what they're really saying is, I was never strong enough to stand beside you. I didn't need to win the breakup. I just needed him to realize he'd already lost. It's been 4 months. 4 months since I walked out of that apartment with nothing but a backpack, a bruised ego, and a strange sense of clarity. 4 months since the last time I heard his voice. He hasn't tried again, not seriously. A couple of vague Instagram story views. A block number call that rang once and stopped. The usual passive-aggressive silence that men like him use as both a weapon and a whimper. But by then, I'd already moved on. Not to someone else, to myself. I moved into a small place, just mine, with too much sunlight and not enough kitchen storage. I bought ugly plants that somehow survived. I joined a boxing class I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. And I started laughing again. Not the kind you perform for company, but the kind that sneaks up on you while you're eating noodles on the floor, realizing you don't miss the quiet manipulation disguised as romance. A few friends came back. Not all, but the ones who mattered. The ones who didn't need the voice memo to believe me. The ones who said, I should have known. I'm sorry I didn't ask sooner. And him? Last I heard, he's still telling his version of the story. That I changed. That I got cold. That I left for no reason. Let him. Let him fill rooms with carefully edited scenes, with dialogue I never said and motives I never had. Because the people who matter already saw the uncut version. The one where I tried. Where I bent. Where I shrank until I didn't recognize myself, and then stood back up. He said I was too independent. What he meant was, he couldn't break me all the way. And now? Now I don't need to explain that to anyone. I don't need to defend my boundaries or apologize for not needing someone to survive. I just live. I breathe. I work. I sleep well. And when I look in the mirror, I don't see the cold, selfish caricature he painted in whispers. I see someone who chose herself. Loudly, clearly, and without regret. That's more than a resolution. That's freedom. If you've made it this far, thank you. Not just for listening, but for really hearing it. Because stories like this, they're not about revenge. They're about remembering who you are, even after someone tries to rewrite you. I used to think choosing yourself was selfish. That if you were strong, you had to prove you could carry the weight. Even when that weight was someone else's silence, resentment, or lies. But now I know better. You don't have to stay small to be loved. You don't have to explain your boundaries to people who never respected them in the first place. And you don't have to defend your version of the truth to the ones who were never interested in hearing it. If any part of this felt familiar, drop a comment. Share your story. I promise you're not alone. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe. Not for the drama, for the reminder. You're not too much. You're just finally enough for yourself.